When your child finds himself out in the field, and certainly there's a number of things that they do to try and avoid the structure out here, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we're talking specifically about the stages of Redcliff. But when we encounter a child in the field, okay, and there'll be a student out there. It happens more frequently than I wished that it would. A student will be opening a letter from home, and something like a stick of gum will fall out of the letter, okay? And, I guess this is one thing. If this is just an envelope or a letter that came from his grandparents who thought he was off at summer camp someplace, but it's an entirely different thing if accompanying that stick of gum is a little note that says, "Dear Johnny, we know that you're not supposed to have this gum, but you've been there for 23 days now, and we thought you would be ready for a little treat. So don't tell anybody about this. Hope you don't get caught. Okay, it'll be our little secret." Now, the thing about this is that Johnny actually won't be enjoying the stick of gum because the staff will have scoped it out as he's opening his letter, right? But far more important than the stick of gum is that information that came through to Johnny. That sense that, gee, my parents can't even actually handle the structure in this setting, okay? In this setting. So yeah, I can do the 14 rules of Redcliff standing on my head because I know that as soon as I get back home, I'm still going to be in charge because my parents are not going to be able to handle the structure. Another way that this comes through is that you walk into a group and a student will come up and say, "Hey, Dr. Yan, guess what? I'm leaving on the 24th. "What? Yeah, I got this letter from home. It said my parents were talking to you and you were thinking that graduation was going to take place on the 24th this next month." And, or there will be one of those, even if it's not directly one of those letters, it will be another letter that says, "Well, we're not supposed to tell you when you're graduating, but we'll see you real soon, hint, hint. And we've planned a welcome home party at Aunt Marcia's house on the 27th, and your cousin Ronald is going to be there, and he can hardly wait to see you." Does those kinds of things. Now, the reason why we don't want this to be happening is because even if you send them a letter that says, "Well, I was talking to Dr. Annie, he thought that potentially you'd be ready to graduate on the 24th and 25th, and that's a month in advance," all they hear is, "I'm out of here on the 24th and 25th, and they see themselves as no longer being subjected to the structure of Redcliff, okay? And so it's like, "Oh, I'm out of here, and now I go into this just mode of coasting," and I actually get somewhat complacent, and there are those things that I can do that will interfere with my ability to make myself ready for graduation as well, So sometimes, even though I think I'm out of here, I may not actually demonstrate that I am ready to leave, and I'm not out of here when I think that I am out of here. Now, I know that all of you have gotten those letters from your child that says, "Well, I think I will be eligible to grad on the 24th or 25th. That's when I think it's going to happen." But that's nothing that anyone here would have mentioned to them. Okay? We don't use the potential of graduation as some type of a motivator, even a positive or a negative motivator. "Hurry up, Johnny, get your phase work done and you'll be eligible." No, we don't ever say that. In fact, your kids don't actually know for sure. Well, it's a little different from the adults, with the adults, but your kids really don't know for sure that they are graduating until just about this time today, even though they were picked up and taken to do their vision quest yesterday afternoon actually. But, those who are really not ready to graduate and don't decide to use the vision quest for what it's intended to be used find themselves back in their groups this morning instead of hiking from vision quest, wherever they are at vision quest, to wherever they're going to be here today when they see you at grad camp. All right? So it's not something that they know, and we do it that way because we don't really want them to be diffusing or dispersing any energy. There is no you know, saying goodbye to Redcliff, or, you know, talking about, oh, I'm out of here, I'm ready to get home, that kind of thing, until you actually get here. We need them to have that energy with them so it's not diffusing prematurely. Okay, but, you know, if we see kids with those kind of letters, if we see kids with scum in the field, you know, those kinds of things, it's a huge indicator to us that the difficulty there is that the parents are having a little struggle with the structure as well. And we know where we need to shift the emphasis of the therapy as well. You know, it's easy to pick up, and there's a lot fewer distractions here as well. Sometimes it gets even worse than that. Sometimes through a weird process of projective identification, the parents actually align themselves with the children against Redcliff. You know, well, we got to defeat Redcliff because they're setting all this structure. You know, that kind of thing. And it's odd to see that. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen very often, but it actually does. Does happen, and it makes it more difficult for us to actually do the therapy the way that it needs to be finished. Okay, so really, as we look at that, though, those are the things that we do as parents. They both have an awful lot to do with structure. You know, we demonstrate what it looks like to deal in an independently responsible way with structure, and we get to implement structure within the realm of our own little homes. As I look at this and I think, well, okay, here I am as a parent in this equation. And it wouldn't take me very long, and I don't have to go very far down on this list to come to that understanding that, gee, you know, wanting my child to become an independently responsible human being is pretty important to me. And I would like to think that that's reflected in almost everything that I do at this point in my life as a parent. So I'm looking at that thinking, yeah, that's pretty high on my list of priorities, and why would that not be important to my child? Obviously, they would need to become independently responsible humans as well. Okay? So I'm looking at what's going on in the context of our relationship, and I observe that there is not much there that would indicate to me that my child is attempting to become more responsible than they already are. In fact, as I'm looking at this, I'm seeing that they're not even really handling the rudimentary levels of responsibility that I'm expecting them to handle just as a member of my family. They're not taking care of their own personal stuff. They're not respecting the family space. They're not respecting family rules. They're not actually respecting me as their parent. Okay? And you know, as this progresses, I'm recognizing that they actually now are developing a life about which I know nothing of. Which makes it that much harder for me to trust them because they never are where they say they're going to be. And you know, I'm spending all of my time now becoming the detective, figuring out what they're doing and what they're up to, and always one lie to the next. Well, no, you didn't talk to the right person. What you need to do is talk to him. You know, and you know, it certainly is not giving me a sense that they are attempting to become a more responsible individual in their lives. So obviously, with all the disruption that this is causing within our family, we go to the therapist. We go to the family therapist. If we can still find somebody that does family therapy, and we go see them, and as we are in the session, it occurs to me, gosh, you know, it seems like the therapist is on the same page that I am. The ultimate goal here is for Johnny to become an independently responsible human being. We come up with all kinds of brilliant interventions that seem so good while we're sitting there in the office. But once again, we find out that all of these brilliant interventions in that 10-minute car ride home turn into amazing weapons that we use to beat each other up. And you know, we never resolve any of the problems. When the problems emerge, they just accelerate into power struggles, and we kind of adopt this very uneasy presence with each other as we're just kind of waltzing around on eggshells, hoping that we don't encounter any of these kind of problems. And it's a very, very uncomfortable existence. And as I'm stepping back thinking to myself, what is the problem? I know what needs to happen. Why is it not happening? Why am I not able to achieve the outcome that I want to have happen here in this kind of a situation? Well, it's a good way of looking at it here. And it's also realizing that if we are expecting this purpose to be achieved, it means that we have to have all of the elements of this relationship in place. They all must be there. If there is something that's missing, then it means that, that we're actually not going to achieve that outcome. So, you know, the absolute essential components are these two individuals who have some sense of who they are and what it is that they need. Okay? There needs to be a mutually identified purpose, and there has to be an approximately equal level of commitment from both of us to whatever that purpose might be. Now, in that scenario that I just described to you, as the parent, as I step back and look at this, I come to that realization that there is a big part of this relationship that's missing. A huge part. In fact, everything that's on this side of the equation that represents my child is missing from that relationship, missing from that equation right there. And, you know, what we do as human beings, you know, the smart thing to do as humans is once we come to that understanding that there is a component of the relationship missing, the smartest thing to do would be able to put all of our energy into filling in the missing piece, okay? Doing whatever we have to do so that piece can be inserted in the relationship where it needs to be. But we don't typically do that as human beings. What we tend to do is just kind of motor along in this kind of sense of stasis, right? Hoping that the missing piece will fill itself in. And, you know, we just kind of keep doing what we've always done until that magically missing piece fills itself in. And, you know, it doesn't really happen that way, especially when we're talking about another human being here. When this part of the relationship is missing with my child, we have to look over here to this kind of a relationship to recognize where they actually are in all of this. Okay? Yeah, we're still here. And all of those things that are going on are my child continuing to clue me in that they have the expectation that they can exist in that kind of an enmeshed relationship with me yet. Okay? They're essentially saying to me, oh, yeah, Dad, there's no question I want to be independent. Okay? But my sense of independence is I do whatever it is I want to do, and you clean up the mess for me, okay? You pick up the tab for my independence. I'm going to be amazingly irresponsible, but I expect you, Dad, to toe the line. And if I ever see you stepping out of line, I'm going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. Okay? It's amazing how that whole thing takes place. So the task that I have, the place where I am now focusing my energy is removing you from this equation and inserting you over here. However I'm going to do that for all of you, that has been, well, it's off to Redcliff for you. Okay? That's what that is. Now, since this is actually the goal of the Redcliff experience, let me talk just a little bit about how this relationship functions before we actually take a longer break here. In the context of this relationship, and remember we have this relationship to help us deal with the problems that inevitably will arise as we are existing here on the planet. So, when the problems emerge here, a couple of things that happen. First of all, when the problems crop up, it doesn't have to freak us out that there are problems here. We realize, hey, these are just problems. They have no life of their own. This is the vicissitudes of life that we would encounter whether we were in this relationship or not. Okay? So it doesn't have to freak us out. We can expect, yeah, okay, here they are. That's why we have this relationship to help us deal with the problems. The second thing is that, of course, we will have a variance of opinion around what we should do with this problem. Okay? And the reason is that we are not clones of each other. I am going to think differently than you do. I will have different feelings than you have. It's okay. That piece does not have to scare us. I don't have an expectation that you think like I do. And, I don't expect that you're expecting me to have to think like you do as well. It's all right. It doesn't have to freak us out that we have a difference of opinion. In fact, we can assume that that's the way that it's going to be. All right? But that does mean that in order for us to resolve this problem, there does need to be some degree of communication that takes place. Generally, this is the part that freaks us out. I'm not really sure. Well, I kind of understand this. And the part that seems strange to me, though, is that as human beings, we know a lot about the process of communication, especially living in our society. We know a lot about communication. There have been guys that have made their entire career out of just the process of communication alone. Most of the time, if we've even attended a single semester of college or university, there's had to be like at least a 100-level communication class in there someplace, right? But we have difficulty with communication as human beings. We have difficulty especially communicating at an intimate level, right? And part of the reason we can understand that, if there is any aspect of me, if there's any one little part of me that in order for me to be okay, even just that little part of me to be okay, is contingent upon you doing or being a specific way, it means I'm not going to tell you what's really in there. Okay, I'm not going to be completely honest with you. I'm only going to tell you what I think you need to hear so that you will respond the way that I want you to respond, so that I don't have to deal with any disappointment, so that I don't have to deal with any pain that might go along with you having a different opinion about me. Or I'm not going to shut up long enough for you to tell me what's really going on with you because I don't want to hear something that might be in a disagreement with me. Okay? Because I'm essentially telling you that I'm not going to be able to bear that pain in and of myself, that I'm not okay enough with myself to be able to do that. So in order for us to be completely honest with each other, it is actually assuming that we are able to take care of ourselves. That we've come quite a ways in our own development where we realize that even if there is some pain involved, we will still be okay. That we'll be able to manage that to the extent that I can be honest with you, even though it might be somewhat painful. If we get to that point, if we're at that place, then we will engage in a process of negotiation. I suppose I could write communication up there, but it doesn't really imply what I would like it to. The negotiation piece implies that it is a process. We're not going to get it the first time through, but we are willing to put whatever energy is necessary to getting to a place where I completely understand where you are with this and you understand where I am. It's a negotiation of understanding. In the past, you may have encountered others who would have made statements to you such as, one should never negotiate with their children. Okay? And, for me, that doesn't really make any sense. I would think that we would want our children to actually learn about the process of negotiation from us. And the other piece is that if I am negotiating with my child according to their developmental level, right, whatever it might be, even if they're like 3 or 4 years of age, and we're negotiating about how to get all of the toys that are scattered all around the room on the floor back into the toy box, and there is a popsicle involved, okay? Even if we are negotiating at that level, then it means that our relationship is in a pretty good place. It's where it needs to be. Now, if we're going to make any grand statements or broad sweeping statements about negotiating, of course we would say one should not negotiate with someone who is not in a position to negotiate, right? And that means then if my child is not developmentally ready to take this position in the relationship, then there should be no negotiating taking place, okay? And if we are attempting negotiation at that point, it's likely it's one of the two of us manipulating the other. That's what's more than likely going on, right? But if it's actual negotiation, that's a good thing. Absolutely. And we'll put whatever energy into it is necessary so that I understand where you are and you understand where I am. Now, once we get to that place, then we have the final acid test. You know, and you might have thought to yourself, or you might even have talked to your therapist while your child has been here at Redcliff and said to them, gee, how do you know that he's not just BSing his way through this? Okay? How would one know that? Well, here's how we know. This is the way. Because once we get through this negotiation piece, there will be a clear indication that in order to resolve this problem, it will require a degree of compromise from both of us. Okay? Each one of us are going to have to do something that, you know, we're agreeing to do it, but it may not necessarily be what we would have necessarily wanted to do. But we will do it because this purpose is more important than this problem. That's the only way that we will agree to do that. All right? And so if we are in this situation where you consistently see that we get to this place, or you think that we're getting to this place, and you are the one who is making the compromise, and I'm not doing anything, that's very good information for you. That essentially tells you that what we really have here is this amazing, elaborate facade that is overlaying this kind of relationship. And I am consistently telling you that I am not ready to commit to anything, and that it's still more important to me to be able to manipulate you to get you to do what I want you to do than it is for me to make a commitment and follow through. I'm really not working towards this purpose. The purpose that I have is to still get you to do what I want you to do. Okay? But it's good information for you, because then at that point you have to decide, okay, where can I support this relationship? It's obviously not going to be at the level of whatever this purpose might be. Is there another purpose in here where we can find some mutual level of commitment? Or, you know, at this point right now, you know, am I going to have this relationship with you? Am I going to have any kind of a relationship with you? You know, so that's how you can tell. That's how you can tell. Is it just BS or what's going on? Now, the beautiful thing, though, is through this process of negotiation and compromise, we actually do resolve that problem, whatever it might be. And, you know, we go on to the next one and resolve that as well. And it's through the resolution of the problems that we do achieve the ultimate purpose that we have identified here. Okay? And through the resolution of the problems, we actually come closer together in our relationship instead of having the problems be the thing that is constantly ripping us apart. Okay? That's the ideal for this kind of a relationship. In understanding this relationship, we've talked about this a little bit already, but the first thing we need to remember is that we will never be solving problems with this relationship. That's not why this relationship exists. Okay? The only reason that this relationship exists is to help us understand who has the power, who has control, who is in charge, who gets to be the center of the universe, and who gets to pick up the tab for the other one to be the center of the universe. That's why we have this relationship. It's all about power and control, right? So there's not a whole lot that we bring from that side of the board and discuss how it applies to this relationship other than the problems. Because as we said earlier, it doesn't matter what kind of relationship we're going to be in, we will encounter problems regardless. But the problems take on a much different form here. Where they were just problems with no life of their own over here, in this relationship, the problems actually become the lifeblood of the relationship. All right? And the reason why that is the case is they provide for us an actual physical forum now for us to determine who is in control. This is the place where we duke it out to figure out who is the one who is in command now, all right? So more than just problems, they actually become that infamous power struggle that we've talked about in the past, all right? That's what they become. And the mechanisms that we use to determine who wins the power struggle, if there is such a thing as winning a power struggle, are, obviously it's not going to be anything that looks like negotiation and compromise. What that will be is many different forms of manipulation. Okay? That's what we're talking about. And manipulation essentially is the hallmark of this kind of a relationship. There will be no interaction that we have in this relationship that is not manipulative in nature. It's all manipulation. Because I'm doing whatever it is that I need to do to get you to make me okay. So I have to do what is ever most effective in assuring that you will be making me okay. Now, we need to spend a little bit of time talking about manipulation, all right? And, so that do you understand what you're up against? And especially if you are talking about leaving a relationship like this, you're saying, well, I'm no longer going to allow myself to be a target of manipulation. So we need to understand why manipulation is as effective as it is. So the first thing, when we start talking about manipulation, is that I guess anyone in this discussion, we have to come to the realization, in order to understand this, the first thing we have to do is get over ourselves. Okay? Really. And recognize that manipulation is a huge part of our human experience. This is something that we learned at a very early age. And it's something that continues along with us. It will always be a part of our human experience. It's hard for us to adopt a position where we are saying, well, I'm always going to be taking the high road here. I'm never manipulating my kids or anyone else. No, it will be something that we do. And, there will always be these kinds of relationships in our lives, okay, where it gets emotionally exhausting, however, if those are our primary relationships. So the first thing that we need to do is recognize that the manipulation has been a part of our experience and will continue to be a part of our experience. And we will likely wind up manipulating others in our lives, and we will continue to be manipulated. But if we are attempting to disrupt a pattern of manipulation that has allowed our child or anyone else to be able to stay in this developmental vacation, it certainly is a worthwhile endeavor. Okay? So let's talk about the elements of manipulation, what goes into it, making it as effective as it is. It just establishes the fact that we are all incredibly intelligent beings, in that we've learned how to master manipulation. We know what it's all about, but it's hard for us to describe the process. If you have an understanding of the process, then you know how to disrupt it. Okay? Now, I think if we were to look at this and try to contrast this with some other experiences, and here we are as adults, and if the occasion arose, like for instance, you wanted me to do something that I didn't particularly want to do, that I was not inclined to do. Typically what you would want to do is say, well, I'm just going to adopt a very adult stance, a mature stance with this. I will collect together all of the evidences and validations, all of the arguments that I need to present to Doc Dan here. And as soon as he sees the genius in my position, I'm sure that he will alter his behavior to do whatever it is that I want him to do. Because he will see, inevitably he will see, that his life would be so much better if he would just do things my way. So I just want to sit down with him and present my case to him, and rationally we will work this through. Okay? Now, you know how that goes. I can sit down with you, I can listen to what you have to say, and I can actually agree with everything that you present to me. I can, with my own cognitions, I can understand that my life would inevitably be much better if I just did what you wanted me to do. But you know how this goes, especially if this little discussion that we are having takes place in the context of a 2:30 a.m. can't you see what you are doing with your life discussion with your errant adolescent, right? And even if they do present at that moment with some degree of contrition, and they are saying to you, I don't know why I keep doing what it is that I'm doing. I know that I'm messing up my life. I know no one trusts me. I know I'm not going to be able to get through school. I'm not going to be able to get a job. I'm going to get in trouble with the law. I just don't know how to stop this. And, at that point you say, well, I know how to stop you. Let me present to you your 7-point plan for improving your life. Okay, let's go over this step by step. Now, even at that time, if your child seems somewhat receptive to this, and you go to bed at, say, 4 a.m., thinking, oh, finally, we've turned the corner, they've seen the light, right? And we're finally operating here from the same page. They're right where I want them to be. It becomes readily apparent just maybe later on that next evening that masterful discussion that you had with your child is completely lost in the cosmos something. It's floating around out there in the miasma of all of those other lectures that we tend to prepare and give at a moment's notice. And you might think to yourself, okay, so why does this not have its intended effect? Why can't I just rationally sit with my child and have them understand why what they are doing is so destructive, not just for them, but for the relationship that we have? Why does that not have the impact? Well, it's easy to understand why this is the case. We don't really even need to look at relationships beyond ourselves in order to understand how this works. Because as human beings, it's pretty much understood that a part of being a human means that there's at least one or two things in our own lives that we all do that we know we shouldn't do. Okay? We all have those kind of behaviors. We all do those, engage in those kind of behaviors or habits, whatever it might be. We all have those little dependencies that we know are not good for us, but we do them anyway. And you think to yourself, well, okay, I'm a reasonable human being, and really all I have to do is just muster a firm degree here of self-discipline and decide, okay, this is ridiculous, I'm just not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. I go out into the world now with this little mantra playing in my head, I'm just not going to do it, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. And we put what may be, I guess we could say, the equivalent of a cognitive clamp on our behavior, right? We go out into the world, and we do okay. We do okay until we encounter, with some degree of intensity, the actual emotional need that underlies that behavior in the first place. Right? Because the reason why we can't just stop those behaviors is because we are always attempting to fulfill some kind of an emotional need with every behavior that we do. And we hang on to those, the kinds of behaviors that we know we shouldn't do. The reason why we continue to do them is our attempts to fulfill whatever that emotional need that they are attached to, which is it's a legitimate emotional need, okay? And so when we encounter that emotional need and and all we are relying upon is this willpower, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. And we are at great risk of relapse, and we find ourselves once again engaged in that behavior, thinking to ourselves, okay, why am I back here doing this? I told myself I wasn't going to do this. It was because we did not find an alternative to actually fulfill whatever that emotional need may have been that we were trying to fulfill with that behavior, right? Until we can actually find something that legitimately does fulfill whatever that emotional need may have been, then we will be continuously at risk of going back and doing those things that we know we shouldn't do. And oftentimes when we just focus on whatever that undesirable behavior may be, we skip over the fact that there was some kind of an emotional need that was driving that. And it's important to understand that piece, right? There is always going to be an emotion that gives life to our behaviors. There's an emotion that drives that behavior. And we tend to go where our emotions take us, not necessarily where our cognitions take us all the time, right? We're going to fulfill whatever that emotional need may be. Now, as we attempt to apply this in understanding manipulation, and we extend this now back to another relationship, and we find ourselves in those kinds of situations where others really do have some kind of an impact on us changing our behavior. It seems kind of odd. If they can be successful in manipulating us to do what they want us to do, it means that at some level they know quite a bit about human behavior change, which is a pretty complicated phenomena. Because as human beings, we really don't change all that often. We don't make huge changes in our lives. We tend to find that place where we're pretty comfortable, where there's just kind of some minor variations, a little fluctuation in there every now and then. But for the most part, we just put our lives on cruise control and kind of let it go in that place where we're comfortable in being. The times where we actually do change our lives are when we encounter emotional material of an intensity that would compel some type of change. Now, when we begin thinking about this in terms of what kind of emotion would we be talking about here, right? Obviously, this is not going to be an emotional experience that's necessarily going to be very pleasant, right? When we encounter things that we like, when we encounter things that are pleasant, we're not changing anything. We just want to keep it going because we like how this feels, okay? So the kinds of things that tend to compel change tend to be those emotional experiences that are more in line with the stuff that we talked about being down there in the basement. The stuff that is not all that pleasant to experience. When we encounter fear, when we encounter sadness, when we encounter maybe the granddaddy of them all, guilt or shame, okay? Those kinds of things. I've actually seen some recent writing where the authors suggest that at the core of any behavior change is disgust. Okay, disgust. None of those are very pleasant emotional experiences, not at all. But they are emotional experiences that we encounter, that we all have the capacity to experience. And they seem to have a self-corrective function attached to them. That when we experience a sense of guilt, that we alter our behavior so that we are not damaging our external environment, others, or ourselves. When we encounter fear, it's probably a good thing that we change our behavior. Sometimes it needs to change almost immediately to keep ourselves in a safe position, right? They are important emotions for us. They have that self-corrective function for us. That's really not the problem when we are encountering those kinds of things as a result of the day-to-day activities in which we engage. Where it gets to be a problem is when we encounter one of those emotions that someone else has dumped on us. And we experience that emotion as though it were our own. Now, typically, let's look at this, okay? Because there's kind of a pattern that we can look at that takes place with all of this. If we are engaged in a relationship with someone who is living that life of avoidance that we've talked about, it means that when they encounter in their lives as a result of their own behaviors, one of those emotional experiences of guilt, fear, sadness, shame, whatever that might be, of course they will avoid it like the plague, okay? But it doesn't just necessarily go away. It causes some bit of dissonance in their own lives, and so essentially what they do is they put it in a nice little box and wrap it up with some brightly colored paper and put a big bow on there. And they take this little gift-wrapped box of emotion and they march it right out to your front door. And they stand out there on your front doorstep ringing that doorbell over and over and over and over and over and over till you come to that front door and open it up to see what's going on. As soon as you open up the door, there they are with this gift-wrapped box of emotion saying to you, here you go, I made this especially for you, and I want you to have it. All right? And if we reach out and grab that box of emotion and say, oh, thank you very much, this is exactly what I've wanted in my life, and we begin experiencing this fear, shame, or guilt as though it did belong to us, that's where we get into trouble. Because now we will be engaged in that kind of self-corrective behavior that we would typically be engaged in if this did belong to us. Right? If this really was our guilt, we would be doing the stuff that we would need to do to try and resolve the situation so that we were not feeling that guilt any longer. The difficulty lies in that it's not our guilt. It belongs to the individual that wrapped it up and gave it to us. And the individual that wrapped it up and gave it to us is now watching us knock ourselves out, do the little song and dance, trying to resolve the situation. And there's no way that we can actually fix it. And in fact, they're over there preparing their next little box of emotional material for us as well. Okay? They're getting ready to hand us the next salvo in all of this. Now, as we look at this process, we need to kind of sort out in here what is the part that is really under our control and what is the part that's somebody else's responsibility. Okay? Well, we can't control whether or not somebody else has decided to live a life of avoidance. We can't control the fact that they're going to wrap up that emotional experience and hand it to us in this great-looking box. Okay? We can't control whether they've identified us as being the target and the recipient of this little gift. We can't control whether or not, they're knocking on the door, pounding loudly out there, ringing the doorbell, whatever it is. Or when we even open the door to see what's going on, that they're standing there thrusting this box right there in our face. Here you go, you got to have this. I insist that you have this. I made this especially for you. I am not going to give this to anybody else but you. All right, we can't control that. We can stand back and say, well, you shouldn't do that. That's not fair that you are doing. That's not a good thing to do. Can't you see how insensitive you are by doing that? But we still can't control that. Okay? All of those things are their decisions. The only piece that we can control is when we decide to reach out and grab that box. Okay? That's the part over which we have any volition at all. That is under our control. And the fact that we would reach out and grab that box because we think that is the best thing for us to do at that moment is where the actual manipulation takes place. Okay? When we understand that the best thing for us to do at that moment is to grab that box. Okay? That's where manipulation takes place, because that is the only piece that's under our volition, right? Now, let's look at this in a more practical sense here, okay? Let's bring this down to earth. And every time I get to this point, I kind of dread this piece because I have to give an example. And so, obviously I'm going to have to give you an example from my own life, right? So let's talk about my daughter Ricky. We'll say that in this little scenario, it's a Thursday evening, okay? It's a Thursday evening about 5:30 or 6 o'clock, and I am standing in the community market in the checkout line with my then 4-year-old daughter Ricky. And we are attempting to purchase whatever it is that we need to purchase for the evening meal so it can be taken home and prepared for the rest of the family who are waiting for us to get there. And I have just, prior to this, had to pick up Ricky from her swimming class, or from her soccer class, or dance class, or fill in the blank, gymnastics, whatever it is that applies here. And we are there in the line. Now, there's a couple of things you ought to know. First of all, on a Thursday evening at that hour of the day, if it is me standing in that line with my daughter, if I have had to be the one that has gone to pick her up, it means that something in my family schedule has already been messed up, okay? That somebody else, her older sister or her mother or whoever it was, had something occur that made it so that I had to be the one to go do that. And it meant also that I would have had to cancel my last afternoon appointment, okay, in order to be able to go do that. So then more than likely what's happening is I am standing in line talking on the telephone either to whoever it was that I canceled for my last appointment, or my office manager trying to realign my schedule for what now is going to be the nightmare of my Friday, okay? And of course I'm not real happy about that, but I'm trying to sort that out. I'm not paying a lot of attention to my daughter. So my daughter, having just engaged now in about 45 minutes or maybe a half hour, you know how little kids are, of vigorous physical activity, has decided that she can no longer exist another moment on the face of this earth unless she actually is able to have that, that bag of peanut M&Ms that she has now selected from that marvelous world of candy that they have at every checkout stand, right? Now, how does this usually progress? Well, in this case, I'm really not paying a lot of attention to my daughter, so, and she's 4, so I can't see the more rational cognitive approach really taking hold here, right? She's not going to start, oh, pardon me, Father. A brief word with you, if I might. Let me extol to you the virtues of procuring this bag of peanut M&Ms, okay? No, it's not going to happen that way, right? And particularly since I'm not paying a lot of attention to her, this is a situation that can quickly erode into my 4-year-old daughter doing the screaming, flailing tuna there in the middle of the market floor, complete with soccer cleats and shin guards, right? Now, what happens? Well, I can tell you what happens when you are me. I'll tell you what happens, okay? When I see the screaming, flailing tuna, the first thing that I do is that quick scan around the market, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I hope none of my clients are here. Okay? Because I know if my clients were to see this, they would be thinking to themselves, geez, what's wrong with Sanderson over there? Okay? He must not be much of a psychologist if he can't even manage his 4-year-old daughter here in this little situation in the store. So obviously, I'm going to have to rethink my position in seeing him professionally. Okay? So I do that quick scan, and then the second scan around where I'm looking at all of the other parents in the store with their marvelously well-behaved children who are sitting quietly in the cart, and they're all looking over there at me, shooting me those daggers. You know how that goes. And I know that they're all thinking, geez, what's wrong with that guy? He must not be much of a father if he is allowing this to happen, if he can't even handle this with his cute little daughter here in the store. And on top of that, he's an extremely rude and insensitive individual who is subjecting all the rest of us to this just disgusting display while we're just trying to get through the whole checkout experience as well. So on top of that, I'm also thinking about the individual who I've had to put on hold on the phone that I was talking to, who also is thinking, geez, what's wrong with Sanderson? He obviously has some personal problems that he's not able to get over. First he cancels the appointment, and now this. I'm not making any headway with him again. I'm going to have to rethink my relationship with him. So on top of all of this, I'm reminding myself, geez, I didn't ask for this, right? This is not my fault. This is not my fault. If somebody else had not screwed up, I would have not even been in this situation in the first place. Right? So, with all of the forces of the universe collapsing around me, even though I know I shouldn't do it, I reach out, grab that bag of M&Ms, and put it up there on the counter to be purchased. Now really, what just happened there? How did my 4-year-old daughter manage to conjure from thin air, mind you, from thin air, the intensity of emotion that compelled me, her older, supposedly wiser father, to grab that bag of M&Ms, against my will, mind you. Okay, I knew this was not a good thing, but I'm grabbing that, I'm grabbing that bag of M&Ms, and I'm putting it up there on the counter to be purchased. How did she actually do that? Any ideas? What do you think about that? Have you ever kind of been here? Yeah. Okay? Well, I realize in asking you that question, it's kind of a trick question in the first place, okay? And it's one of the first things that we need to understand about this whole process of manipulation is, first of all, no one else can create emotion for you to experience. Okay? There is no way for someone to conjure emotion and then just somehow inject that into you so that just out of nowhere, oh, I'm feeling something. Okay? No, that's not happening. That's not happening. And even though my daughter was behaving a specific way, there was no way for her to create emotion for me to actually feel. But we learned a little bit earlier, right, that any behavior is driven by emotion, right? We're fulfilling some kind of emotional need with any behavior that we exhibit. And especially behavior change is driven by an emotional experience. You know, and there I was standing in line of the community market, the checkout line, talking on the telephone, and now here I am buying M&Ms. I have changed my behavior. So obviously there was some emotion that was driving that. Where was that emotion actually in the first place? It was already inside of me. It was already there. Most specifically, where was that emotion? It was down there in my basement. Okay? That's where it existed. Now, the odd part about this, the part that sometimes is difficult to actually understand, especially when we're talking about humans, adult humans here, is how did my daughter even know about the existence of that basement? You know, I never told her about any of that stuff that made it so that I have all of that stuff in the basement. No, she doesn't know anything about that. She's 4, right? Well, she is 4, and the thing about it is she's had 4 years for me to teach her all about my basement. And it has been her job to learn about my basement, and she has been a masterful student. Right? Remember, we are in this kind of a relationship. And rightfully so, developmentally appropriate, this is where we are in our relationship. And really the only influence that she has in the world is whatever it is that she gets through me. So, anything that she can do to influence stuff that I do is going to be in her best interest, obviously. So she's been able to hang around with me for 4 years and find out how things go for me. This is one of those things that we learn how to do. Even now, here we are as adults. You could ride around with me for a couple of days out there in the field in a pickup truck. And by the time that we were done with that, you would have a pretty good knowledge of what it was that was there in my basement. You wouldn't know how it got there, maybe, but you would know what's in there. And the same thing is true. I would know that same thing about you. Part of this relationship is that understanding that I know a component of you better than you do. Whatever it is about yourself that you would like to cut off and disavow and put down there in your basement, I'm going to know all about it. And you're going to know all about that stuff for me. And if we perceive each other in this kind of a relationship where my sense of well-being is hinged on getting you to do what I want you to do, I'm going to start pounding away at that basement. I'm going to start pulling those strings and punching those buttons so that I can get you to do what it is that I want you to do. Even if I'm 4, especially if I'm 4. Because when I am 4, I have no reliance, I have no capability of dealing with that cognitive, dealing with you in a cognitive kind of a rational mechanism.